lovely to be here with all of you here. I'm a morning person. I hope you all are. Who's not a morning person? So I can pick on you next time. So thank you for inviting me here today. It's an opportunity and a pleasure. And I'm here to kind of shed a light on my story. And actually the theme of risk is quite, let's say, it hit me right on the core because it's actually the perfect theme. I say risk is my middle name actually because it's who I am. So I hope if you can stop me whenever you're kind of like confused, so just raise your hand and hey, Yara, I don't get it. Ik begreep niet, so tell me. And yeah, and at the end we can also have an open discussion about general stuff. So basically when you called me to say like you have to talk about risk, I'm like, it's such a thing like for me that it's such a default, I never think about it. So I said, okay, let's look at risk, you know, I asked myself, is it a human instinct? And I thought it was.
Could you
Sorry.
hold the mic a bit lower, please?
Lower here, like this?
No, lower on the mic. You're holding
my
the
hand.
yeah.
Ah, okay, sorry. It's a very old school mic, actually. Don't they put it here now? Like. So. Should I do like the rappers? Yo, bro. So basically, I was saying that risk, I thought it was a human instinct, right? So then I said, okay, let's do some research and see what this risk means to people or to scientists. And there's this dude called Thomas. He's a psychologist, and he said that actually, risk is actually a human instinct. So I said, so everyone should be risk by nature, risk-taking by nature. And he also said that it's necessary, so it's something that everyone should do in order to develop oneself. So I said, okay, so why aren't we all risk takers? So I said, why? So then I said, okay, if we all can be risk takers, then it's actually our choice to be one or not to be one. But I don't think those who decide not to become risk takers choose not to. Maybe they were put in situations where they didn't have to. So this is actually the question. So to take a risk or not to take, that is the question. But then it also depends on the situation and the circumstance you're in that forces you or might lead you to take a risk. So then I said, okay, let's deep dive. What is risk? What is it exactly? So I opened the dictionary and God behold, it's all negative stuff, you know, like exposure to death, to danger, unpleasant, unwelcome. It's all these negative stuff that is associated with risk. And I'm like, why is it so negative? I mean, if it's a human instinct, and we see people taking risks quite often, not that often, but then why is it such a negative connotation in order for us humans? And then I thought, okay, so let's put risk in people's words. So I said, okay, risk is scary, it's unpredictable, and it's solely ambiguous because you don't know what's next. So this is how people like identify with risk. Then I said, okay, then what does it exactly mean? So it's actually giving up what you know for what might be. So again, the ambiguity, right? Then I thought, why the hell aren't we all risk takers? Then I deep dive into humans, see how our psychology are and how twisted we are. So I said, okay, as human beings, we, like sheep, unfortunately, we like to follow others. So when we follow others, it's really easy for us to not take risks. So it's something like, you do this, okay, I'll follow you, follow me. So it's a kind of a domino effect where you're just blindly doing something without thinking. And then this kind of succession makes you fall into the comfort zone, which makes you think like, okay, I have a job, I have kids, I have a wife. I'm okay, why do I need to get out of my comfort seat, right? Why should I move and change seats? So it's actually for us to avoid discomfort, we say it's easier to stay in my current situation and location right now. And then I said, let's look at the human like lifespan and compare risk to age. And this is actually a funny way of kind of saying what happens to you as a person when you grow older. So when you start, you're like 100% risk taker. You're a kid, you're creative, you don't really give a shit about life because you're a kid, huh? I can scratch on my mom's wall. Yeah, she'll punish me a bit, but they don't care, kids. And that's what makes them risky, right? They're always risk takers. And they burn their hand once and they'll burn it again because it's human instinct again. And the more we grow older, the more we become less risk takers. But then at a certain age, when you're like, I don't know, 80, 90, you'd be like, who cares? And that's why you start taking risks again, but it's like a bit late, you know? So this is how I see people today, in terms of risk and taking risks or not. So then I said, as humans in today, the reason why we don't take risks is because we overthink stuff a lot. So when you say, can I jump out of the window? You say, no, but if you jump, you'll break your hand, and then you won't get to work, and then, so we kind of exaggerate the outcomes or the consequences of something, making us a bit scared of it. Then we also underestimate ourselves as humans, and we say, and you tell the person, no, dude, you can't make it. And then I'm like, yeah, you're right, man, I can't make it. So in a way, you're discouraging your own hopes and potential. And then the last thing is you actually tame yourself, because when you're sitting in that office and in that job that you've had for 7 years, you're sitting in your desk and you're like, I'm okay. I'm fine. I mean, but deep inside you're not, but you're convincing yourself, right? You're like, it's okay. I mean, compare yourself to others. So fun, huh? I'm okay. So it's a kind of like, it's playing with your head, right? You're playing with your own head. And then I thought, okay, but let's talk on behalf of everyone here, right? Because if I talk about risk, then risk has a lot of variables on which it happens. And I divide it into, for instance, it depends on your personality. It depends on the society around you, so the people around you and how they influence your possibility to take risk. The context that you're in, and this is very important. And then, of course, your cultural background. And this is where I come to talk as an expat here. I see here people in Europe are not very risky in general, because, and I thought, but why are people here always afraid, you know? And the first instinct was for me was when I was walking in the streets here, and there was a zebra crossing. And back home, we don't even have zebra crossings. So I'm like, it was the first time I saw a zebra crossing, honestly. Yeah? So I'm walking, and I walked with my friends, and then I kind of walked away from the zebra crossing. So my friend, he was Dutch, he's like, Yara, come here. And I'm like, dude, it's green. He's like, yeah, but this is a zebra crossing. And I'm like, dude, chill. And then I thought, this really woke me up. I'm like, why are people here like this? And then I thought, why are we, as Arabs or Middle Easterners, risk takers? Then it hit me. I'm like, yeah, because in the Middle East, nothing works, right? So if you go to a social like kind of thing, I want to apply for a post office or whatever, you go there, you say you intend to go there at 9, thinking they'll be open at 9, you go there, and the guy's still having coffee. So you're like, shit, I'm late to work, I have an appointment, what do I do? So you have to kind of take a risk, right? But you come here in Holland or Belgium or whatever, everything is a punto, on time, you know, there's nothing that can possibly go wrong. So why take risks, right? So this is what actually, that's what fascinates me being here in Europe. And I was in Italy, and people are quite more risky than here. But the more you go north, the more it's like, no, don't take a risk, because it might be, you don't know the outcomes. So I'll go deep dive into that later, but this is the intention of why I say cultural background and context are the most important factors of what makes risk happen. And then I say, okay, those who try or intend to take risks, they're the ones who yearn for the sweet feeling of sweet success. You know, every time you get something done, you're like, it's like this adrenaline. You're like, I did it, you know, because you thought you couldn't do it. But when you do achieve it, you're like, amazing feeling. And some people can become addicts to risks. And this is why I'm here today. So my name is Yara Al Adib. And I'm here to confess that I took way too many risks in life. And against my parents' will and against the society, my society. So yes, I'm guilty. But I have to say that I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the amount of risks I have taken so far. So I'm 27 years old, so I've taken like quite a few, many risks. But I'm sure that I'm going to take even more because I really become an addict to taking risks because it's so fun, you know? You're like, sometimes you do it with stupidity, but it ends up right, and you're like, damn, thank God. But then when you do it once, it becomes super easy to do it again and again. So it actually all starts from where I come from. So this is actually my passport. And this is a glimpse of who I am. So I'm a kind of citizen of the world. And I'm Syrian, born in Syria, but I barely lived there. So we moved when I was 8, 9, because we had to run away from the Syrian regime. So we moved to Kuwait because it was a good place for my father. He was a captain, so it was a good place to work. So we moved there with him, and we were, for my dad and my mom, the main intention was to be in Kuwait to get a very good education. So there were a lot of American schools there. Hence, you have my English accent here, my American accent. So we were like almost Americanized because we were in American schools. We followed the same path like every other expat in Kuwait would do. And my parents' intention was always focusing education, because it was the only kind of key for us to go further in life. And my parents are Syrians, and they know what it means to have a Syrian passport. But that was like 1995, so Syria was not like the way it is today. So I graduated from high school, barely graduated actually, because I was always like slacking off and I hated school. And so my mom was like, so Yara, where do you want to go for university? And I'm like, I want to be a designer. She's like, designer? What is this? And I'm like, design, you know, Photoshop, Illustrator, you know, design stuff. She's like, what is this bullshit you're talking about? What is this design discipline you came from? You're like, where did it come from? I'm like, Mama, you know, it's the new next thing. That was back in 2006, so almost a long time ago. And I'm like, Mama, I really want to do it. And she's like, Yara, there's no future for this. I mean, do architecture, do engineering, but graphic design? I'm like, no, Mama, I want to do it. She's like, Yara, no. And I'm like, shit, I have to convince her. So I go to my dad. I'm like, do you agree with this? He's like, I don't mind, but you have to convince your mom. I mean, she sees you slacking off at university, at school, so how does she trust that you made the right choice? So I'm like, okay, let's make a deal. If I get accepted, number one, it's a sign. Number two, if I handle the first year and I get a good grade, that's how I have to kind of sell myself, then you can let me go further. And she's like, okay, we try. But my mom was super reluctant, right? She said, but we can do something else. Why don't you also apply for architecture on the side? In case things don't work out, you can always become an architect. So I said, okay, Mama, I'll do it. But in reality, of course, I didn't do it. Huh? So I made her believe that I applied for both and it's okay. And she was always thinking, you know, every time we're talking, so I went to Lebanon, to the American University of Beirut, and it was my first time being alone, so I was 17. And every time she called me, so how's everything going? So we actually had to do 1 year of preparatory in order to enter a design degree. I'm like, good. She's like, are you taking all the prerequisites for architecture because you have to do math? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it, don't worry, yeah. All's good, huh? And then I graduate from the first year and I get quite a good grade. And then I get accepted to the graphic design department, and then she can't say anything. So what I did was I forwarded her my transcript of grades, and I'm like, voila, in your face, I'm gonna go to do graphic design. And so she couldn't really say anything because we made a promise, right? And so I stay in Lebanon for 5 years, and I do my graphic design degree, a very long degree, because it's actually 4 years with 1 year of extra. So I graduate from Lebanon, and my mom was waiting, you know, counting the days for me to come back home, because I'm the only girl between two boys, and mommy's girl. She's gonna graduate, come here and work, you know. So I'm like a bit reluctant again to go back to Kuwait after 5 years. So I come back to Kuwait, and I have this high ego because I came from a very good, renowned university, and I'm a designer, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get a job like so easily. It was 2011. The market in Kuwait was not really a creative market, so it was quite difficult to sell myself and my skills, and I'm like, ooh, this is gonna be harder than I expected. So I stayed actually 6 months unemployed, which was kind of bad, you know, like I have a very good university, very good degree. What's the problem? And I start to fall into a kind of a depression mode, like, what the hell did I just do 5 years? And I was afraid that my mom was right, you know? And every time she looked at me, she wanted to open that conversation, I would like run away because I don't want her to be right, you know? But I believed in it so much. So what I do is I finally find a job that I didn't like. It was in a printing press, and I was the only girl in a printing press. So I took the job just to say that I have a job. But then on the side, I was like, yeah, I have to find a plan B because this is not sustainable. So what I do was like, I need to find a new adventure. I need to go further with what I do as a designer because I still felt what graphic design was something super like 1 in a million in what design can do. So what I started doing was actually research, you know, what's out there. And I'm like, I really want to go into product design because I'm very much I like touching things. I don't like this philosophical talk of design. And I want to do something, you know. So let's go into product design. So what I do is I do some research and I'm like, I want to go to Italy. And why Italy? Because it's everyone's designer's dream to go to Italy, Italia, of course, the city of design. So I said, okay, let's try. So I do some Googling around and I find a good product design master in English, which was in a way like better because I didn't have to learn the language and everything. So I said, so one time we're sitting on the dinner table and I'm like, Mama, Papa, I found a good university for masters in Italy. My mom turns at me, she's like, masters? Well, where did this come from? I'm like, oh, come on, look at me. I barely work here. I mean, I don't like this context. She's like, you know what? You don't know what you want in life. Stop it. Stop this bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is going to be more difficult. So what I do is I kind of have to say, I have to sell it more, right? So I do research day and night in order for them to see the importance of me doing a master's. And the problem was not money, the problem was nothing. It was just her wanting me to be home, you know? So I said, and also because she's an Arab, she wants me to follow every young woman's dream. So I come back home, my parents buy me a car, I work, and then Prince Charming comes, he asks for my hand, I get married, voila. So she wanted that, but obviously I was totally in the other side of the road. So she kept kind of pushing like, Yara, don't, overthink stuff. Just stay here. Look how easy life is. Look, you have everything. Why are you always complaining? And then I thought, this is my problem. Life is too easy. I want something more challenging, to spice up my life a bit. It's so boring in Kuwait. So then I go back and I said, okay, I'm just going to go for it. Huh? And then I find a good, and it was difficult to find a master's degree in English in Italy because in Italy, English, not really the same line, but I really wanted Italy. So I find one master degree in Politecnico di Milano, and it was called Product Service System Design. It was one of the few masters in Italy. And I'm like, what is Product Service System Design? So I read about it, and it was fairly a new master, one of the few in Italy that offers something like this. I read about it, but Italian and English, they don't even explain well what the master is. But it had product in it, right? So I wanted product design. So I read again, and those brochures were so bad, you couldn't really get what they wanted. So I said, whatever, I'll just apply. People go sometimes, they apply to masters, and then they change. What's the worst that can happen? I'll apply. So I applied, and it was a public university, so they asked for a lot of stuff. So I had to translate everything in Italian. I had to go back to Lebanon to translate my degree. So my mom was like, this is taking too much of your time. And I'm like, give me some time to explain myself. So I do it, I apply for everything. And I was still working at my stupid, boring job at the printing press. So then at a certain moment, funny Italian system, I never got any confirmation or anything. So it was just by chance going into this, portal where you have a username and a password. And I swear to God, this was like December 2011. So I look at this portal, and then there's a kind of a barcode on the side where it has red, green, yellow, like a code, And then it says my name and then green. I'm like, green. And it's all in Italian. Cat, so what does green mean? Accepted. I'm like, fuck, I'm accepted to the program. So I go, back to the living room. I remember my mom was there. She was picking some fruit or something, and I'm like, Mama, I got accepted to Milano. I swear to God, she barely looked at me. She's like, good. She didn't want it. So I called my dad. I'm like, Papa, I got accepted. He's like, yeah, that's my girl. I'm like, but my mama is not convinced. He's like, don't worry, she'll get into it. So what happened was that finally we convinced my mom. My mom's like, I have one choice. You have to agree on. I'm like, what? She's like, I have to come with you. I'm like, what do you mean come with me? Just come with you to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, Mama, I'm 21. I've been abroad before. She actually just wanted to go to Italy, so it was, So I'm like, okay, va bene, you come with me, but you come for a week. I find a place, and then ciao, you leave me alone. So basically, we went there, and it was not easy. So basically, I went there because I needed to find a place to stay before I started. And I remember we were in hotels for 2 weeks, finding a place. And I remember at a certain point, I swear to God, I remember this very well. My mom was in the hotel, panicking. She's like, Yara, this is impossible. Let's go back to Kuwait. You don't have a house. You're already starting. And I'm like, are you crazy? After all this, we go back to Kuwait. If you want, you go back. I'm staying here. And so the day after, finally, we find an apartment. And I'm like, now you can leave me alone so I can pursue my dreams. So she was, she was good, contenta, let's say. Like, she's fine. She can leave. So she left me alone, and I went on, and I started this master degree that I didn't know what the heck it was. I remember the first course, it was with a professor, like super serious Italian professor, and she was talking about networks and services, and about social innovation, and all these words that I've never heard in my life before. But I remember it was a 2-hour session, and she was talking about the importance of collaboration, the importance of co-creation, all these buzzwords that seemed quite interesting. And I'm like, it seems I'm in the right place, I think. I'm like, let's go with the flow, Yara, just go with it. Then I take another course, and it was product, like real product design. And then they introduced a new word, which was service design. And I'm like, service design, what the hell's that? Oh yeah, it was part of the master, right, so I have to know what it is. So deep diving again, I'm like, this thing seems interesting, because not only do you do a product, but you do a product and a service that works together to provide a system. Ah, that's what the master is about. Okay, I get it. So it sounded interesting. We were deep diving more into social projects, so that was for me super interesting, because you can all see I'm a very social person. So it was like, how do we employ design to solve social challenges? Sounds interesting. I really like this. Then in my head, I thought, oh, I was super lucky. I chose the right thing for me. And it was very good that I had a graphic design background prior to that, because all the projects or all the ideas that came about, we had to execute them. So execution, I was doing all the execution. So it was kind of, I was like the T-shaped designer. So I had the core, which was graphics, and then I complemented it with service and social innovation. So I kind of had a full package, basically. So what happened was then I said, hey, now we have to go back to Kuwait after I graduated, right? So go back to Kuwait. Again, the same story in my life. But it wasn't the best time to go back to Kuwait, because it was back in 2014. And it was the time where Syria's war has been already 2 years started. And yes, we're Syrian, so our passports weren't necessarily the sexiest passports to have, right? So they were doing all these rules on expats, Syrians especially. My father was almost retiring from Kuwait. And I said, oh, this is not a good sign. I mean, so my dad was pushing, like, find a job and settle down and stop moving around, this really serious tone. No more playing around, You need to find your future, and your passport doesn't help you, so you need to let your education help you. And I'm like, this is difficult. So I applied for jobs, and I was overqualified for the Kuwaiti market, which is another story. Then I said, okay, I'm not going to apply for jobs, I'll freelance. So I was actually freelancing, and I was doing design workshops in Kuwait, the design thinking workshops. And I think in like 2 or 3 weeks, I was in the news like crazy. Oh, this new designer doing design thinking workshops. So it was so easy to shine in Kuwait, because Kuwait is even smaller than Belgium. And there are few designers only. And yeah, this woman, she came from abroad, and she's doing all these workshops. So at a certain moment, it was fun. But then at the end, I'm like, okay, but this is not fun anymore because I'm doing it all alone. I mean, it's a one-man show, and there was no collaboration. I could never work with people. It was just me selling it and providing it. So I was a bit like, okay, let's go for a PhD now. Done, bored. And my mom looks at me, she's like, Yara, you have to settle down, honey. This is not the life is not a game. You don't go out and change every time. I'm like, I can't help it. So my mom's like, yeah, good luck with getting the visa now. And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot about that one. So suddenly I'm applying for PhDs to go into more the social, so how can design impact social challenges? Of course, with the topic of refugees. And I applied and I got quite good acceptances, but then now the question was the visa, right? So a lot of people were saying, I was hearing a lot of people being rejected for the UK, for the US. And I'm like, oh, this is niet goed, huh? So what happens was a guardian angel comes to me and tells me, it was an invite from Belgium to come do a workshop here. So it was back in January 2015. So it was a project on social innovation, and they wanted me for 2 weeks. So I was like, wow, this is a perfect chance to go back to Europe, right? So I applied for the visa, I got rejected. I apply again, I get rejected, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. What do? I can talk to the ambassador, maybe he'll help me. So my dad's like, who are you to talk to the ambassador? I'm like, I need to get the visa. So what happens was that I really find a way to get the ambassador. And I reach him and he's like, so, how can I help you? I'm like, I need a visa, bro, because I need to get there and my flight is tomorrow and I really want to go there. He's like, so what are you doing there? I'm like, I'm going to Liège to do a workshop on social innovation. Liège, but it's such a bad neighborhood. Like, that's why I'm going, to work on social impact. And he's like, okay, so your visa was rejected because you're Syrian, na-na-na-na-na. Okay, how do I get one now? He's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a visa that is a short-term visa. So it's basically a one-entry visa where you get in Belgium, you have to come back. I'm like, that's quite limiting, in my head, of course. Like, oh, thank you, ambassador, thank you, just give me the visa. So I get the visa, I'm on a plane the next day, and I'm in Belgium. I do the project for 2 weeks, but in my head, I'm like, Yara, you got here this time. You might not be able to come again, right? So I said, oh, okay, so I call my parents. Mom, Dad, I think I'm not coming back again. What do you mean? Mama, I need to stay here. I mean, what am I going to do when I come back to Kuwait? You don't want to hear the same story, right? So she's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'll contact a lawyer and I'll see how it works. So indeed, I contact a lawyer. And she's like, you're Syrian, you're a woman, you're educated, apply for political asylum. And then you'll be here as a refugee. I'm like, but I'm not a refugee. She's like, yeah, but you're Syrian. So your passport makes you a refugee. I'm like, okay, so what do? It's like, apply like every other asylum seeker and see how it goes. Okay, not always not on my agenda at all. So I applied and I got the status in a month and a half, which was super fast. I'm like, Yara, it's a sign, right? I took all these risks to come to Belgium and to do everything. I'm meant to be here. And so I'm here today with all of you after a year and 2 months. And I got a job at Deloitte Digital as a UX designer. And I've been working there since September. That's another story, yeah? That's another creative talk, yeah. But actually, that's the story of my life. And that's why I'm a risk taker. Thank you.